Hello and welcome to another episode of the Actionable Truth Podcast. I'm Michael Ginsburg. This is another episode that is actually being recorded as a live stream. And as you can see, I am actually joined by three guests now. That's, I think, a record for me on the live stream for this podcast. I'm joined by three lovely ladies from across the ditch, as we call it in Australia. And if you are not from Australia, that just means New Zealand. That's how we kind of call each other. So we have three ladies here. One is Ursula Edgington, and if you've been following my work for any period of time, you're probably familiar with that name. Ursula and I have collaborated for quite a long time now, coming to 3 years. Have done some pretty significant work, and we have something very, very significant in the works right now. We'll leave it at that, but let's just say that even our combined brain power, the two of us, wasn't enough, and we had to recruit reinforcements for that one. And the other two ladies are Deborah Cunliffe and Kathryn. And I will let them introduce themselves, and then Ursula can go at the end in case there's something else that you need to know about her. So starting with Deb.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us on your podcast today. It's really exciting for us to be here. We're very privileged. So my name's Deborah Cunliffe, or Debbie, or Deb, or I'm generally only Deborah when I've done something wrong, and that's my husband calls me Deborah. And I've been a nurse for 4 decades, and started off in the UK, and came to New Zealand in 2003. And I worked more recently as a clinical nurse specialist in diabetes. Sadly, I was mandated, and no doubt during the course of our chat this afternoon, we'll go into the story, but I was mandated from my role as a rural mental clinical nurse specialist in 2021. That's me.
All right. Yep, that's Deborah. And next is Kathryn.
Hi, everybody. It's lovely to be here. It's a privilege to be here, so thank you for inviting me. I'm Kathryn, and I was a school principal, primary school principal, and also mandated. I was in education. I'd been in education for nearly 30 years, and 12 of those years as a school leader.
Okay, all right. And last but not least, Ursula.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Michael, for having us on. And it's really useful, actually. It's a real valuable experience to get my friends, I call them. They are very good friends that they've, have become over the last few years, Deb and Kathryn. I'm an educationalist, so I've certainly got things in common with Kathryn and obviously Deb in terms of work experience and reflecting on practice. And it's interesting that you both use that term mandated, because I think there's still people out there who don't actually recognise what that means. So I think we should try to be explicit about the fact that it was the vaccine, what was it actually called? The order, vaccination order, which was secondary legislation, which actually discriminated explicitly against those staff, public sector workers in particular, who did not comply with the 2 doses and then actually 3 doses of what was mainly Pfizer vaccination for the COVID, whatever you want to call it, era.
It was actually called the COVID-19 Public Health Response, brackets, Vaccinations Order 2021. And it came into being on the 25th of October. It's indelibly printed on my mind.
Yeah, thanks for that, Deb. Yeah, so it is where, I mean, it's, time passes and we all experience these people who say, oh yeah, but that's all in the past. And actually, no, it's not in the past. It's still very relevant today. There's still people fighting, as Kathryn will explain. She's one of the individuals who is fighting for some justice in the courts in New Zealand and elsewhere. So, so that's just my additional comment on the introductions. But yeah, I write my own Substack as well as helping. We collaborate on a lot of stuff, Michael and I. So my Substack is Informed Heart, and yeah, that's it. Really?
Probably should have prepared the link in advance just to your Substack, but yeah, it just informed heart substack.com.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So yeah, thanks, ladies. Thanks for the introduction. Before we get into the actual conversation, I guess I want to give us a bit of a reminder of what happened in New Zealand. I think probably a lot of people have seen this clip because it's gone viral at the time, and I think it comes with a major trigger warning, especially for people. I think it's applicable for everyone, and I think it is important because I think a lot of people are already starting to forget. I think probably, including even people in New Zealand. So I think it's worth reminding people, right, what has actually happened and what was done. So we're gonna play a clip featuring a certain lady that I think you will be familiar with, and let's see how we go.
It's just a couple of minutes, isn't it?
It is only 2 minutes, so it shouldn't be too long. All right, let's have a look. Okay. Sorry, some issues here. Just trying to make sure we've got it good. It is quite a significant clip, so I want to give it the respect. Well, I wouldn't call it respect, but give it the focus it deserves. So let's play that.
Will people, second question, will people who refuse to take the COVID-19 vaccine be banned from travelling internationally or be on the end of tax penalties, says Dan? Good question.
No, but, and we haven't, for any vaccination in New Zealand, applied penalties in that way. But I would say, Dan, for anyone who doesn't take up an effective and tested and safe vaccine when it's available, that will come at a risk to them.
Yes, so will you, in this country, have sanctions against people who don't take or aren't vaccinated against COVID?
No, we haven't done that. If you want summer, if you want to go to bars and restaurants, get vaccinated.
Sanctions against people.
No, we haven't done that. Get vaccinated today if you want to avoid level 3 in your community.
Sanctions against people.
No, we haven't done that. If you want to go to a gym or a sports event, get vaccinated.
Sanctions against people.
No, we haven't done that. So as we all look ahead and we think about summer and the plans that we are making, make the first step a vaccine. It is the thing that will make those summer plans possible.
Sanctions against people.
No, we haven't done that. If you want to get a haircut, get vaccinated.
Sanctions against people.
If you want to go to a concert or a festival, get vaccinated.
Sanctions against people.
No, we haven't done that because actually when you look at the levels of vaccination we managed to reach in New Zealand, they are high. People talk about anti-vaxxers. It's actually the bigger issue in New Zealand is more of what Dr. Bloomfield calls vaccination hesitancy. It's not people who are strongly morally opposed. It's more people who just need a bit of extra support, remove the barriers, a bit of more information.
But no penalties if you don't.
I see no reason to do that. We get up well over 90% for our vaccinations without that, and I believe we will for this.
But no penalties if you don't.
I see no reason to do that. If you are not vaccinated, there will be everyday things you will miss out on.
But no penalties if you don't.
I see no reason to do that.
You basically said this is going to be it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, the two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
But no penalties if you don't.
I see no reason to do that. That is what it is, so...
Lovely human, isn't she? Yeah, so since then, obviously, she's become a dame and she went to work for the royal family and I don't know what else she's done. And I believe she's also become quite wealthy. So, yeah, I mean, look, the pandemic was good times for her and probably still is now. So, yeah, New Zealand's favorite citizen, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of gets us into, I guess, the frame of mind of what we're going to talk about. And I guess what we want to talk about is the COVID Enquiry that was held in New Zealand. And I think it's a good case study because it kind of shows, for me at least, what happens if we rely on the proper channels, the proper venues to get justice, right? So I guess this is where I would love to hear from both of you, both Kathryn and Deb. just if you can explain to the audience what this inquiry is, who called it, like what were the terms of reference, what was the responsibility of the inquiry, and why, I guess, the two groups that you represent, nurses and teachers, why did you choose to even bother preparing a submission?
Deb, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, obviously, when the last government was in place, they put into place a COVID inquiry, but it had very, very restricted terms around it. So this coalition government, one of the understandings between the coalition, if I'm correct, and Ursula can correct me on this, was that they would have an expanded terms of inquiry for this recent or current Royal Commission of Inquiry called COVID-19 Lessons Learned. Still not completely broad and from a very limited period of time. So I think it was 2022 to 2023. I think it was very, very limited. So it's not talking about what's happening now. It's talked about what happened in a very limited space of time. The terms of reference were expanded. So it covered things like vaccination, the mandates, the lockdowns, the financial imposition on the country, etc. But there's a lot of discussion about whether it's gone wide enough. From our perspective, and as you opened quite rightly with today, people are still being impacted by the what happened during the COVID era, and nurses and teachers particularly are still impacted, especially the unvaccinated nurses and teachers. So it hasn't gone far enough because it's not discussing what's currently happening and how 4 years on people are still struggling with what was meted out to us during that period of time. But what the nurses submitted, simply because what happened was wrong, and we have tried so many other avenues to try to raise awareness of what happened, to raise awareness of what happened in nursing, what is still happening in nursing, and how nursing is divided, how nursing is struggling with workforce shortages, with sickness, with an overwhelming sense of who knows what's happening. We wanted to raise awareness of the lack of informed consent, of the duty of do no harm. We wanted to raise the impact of COVID injuries, etc., etc. We had tried so many avenues to do that, but nothing was being taken seriously. We've had meetings with MPs. We've written numerous letters. We had 2 National Day of Actions, hoping that any one of them would spark an interest with the media, at least, who would then represent us with government, but nothing happened. So as nurses, we decided, well, what have we got to lose? So obviously the lovely Ursula has been a great help in doing all this, because as an academic writer and researcher, she helped us to put together our content and the feelings and what we were seeing, hearing, feeling, breathing. She helped us to put that in academic terms and present it to the Royal Commission. The actual outcome of the commission won't be heard until February next year, which is when they're in the middle of writing the report now. In fact, I think they've written the report. They're just finalising how it's presented to the public. But the honest truth is we are not really hopeful, because we've seen it unfold in other countries. So we know that in other countries it's a whitewash. That's the best word I can describe, that we're not really being represented. And why do we know that? We know that because if there was going to be some actions taken, especially with regard to the nursing workforce, they wouldn't be waiting until the outcome of the Royal Commission of Inquiry. They'd be inviting us back to work now. They'd be putting measures into place that eased that path, but they're not. And so they're certainly not going to make any difference to those nurses that haven't gone back into work. The Royal Commission of Inquiry, it won't make any difference. We're pretty adamant about that. And obviously there's been a few other things which no doubt we'll cover during the course of this chat that also give us some key indicators that it's probably going to have very little bearing going forward.
So I guess from your perspective, I mean, you expected initially, obviously now, I guess you know better, but I mean, you expected initially that it could actually make a difference. And that's why I guess you put the effort into, like, treating it seriously and making it like a proper submission, and obviously that takes time and effort, and you believe that it will, you've put effort into that, so it will be taken seriously, right?
And
that obviously has not happened. Yeah.
I think for us it was about getting it on the public record, wasn't it, Deborah? The fact that, like you said, what happened was wrong, and it needs to be evidenced firmly in lots of different places, online and physically. We've printed, but that's the other thing we've done, is we managed to fundraise to get a fair few $100s so that we could actually print off and hard copy bound post off these copies of the reports that are they're 80 pages long, in colour, to strategic people who need to read them. And again, okay, so some of them will just be literally put into the bin, but they're on the record. We sent them tracked and recorded delivery. We know that these people have received those ones, on email or in hard copy. And yeah, what else can we do? We've got to do something. So that's what we've done together. And Kathryn can probably explain what happened. The teachers one was slightly different, so to the nurses one, but yeah.
Yep. Go ahead, Kathryn.
Yeah. So the teachers one, we were very fortunate. We both Ursula and I were quite well respected in the New Zealand Teaching Speaking Out for Science group. And we felt really honoured, actually, that they were the people that decided to contribute and make comments against the survey or to the survey were very trusting of us, because they absolutely poured their hearts out. And that's not something that people would normally do in a traumatic situation if they didn't trust the people that they were sending the data to. So we were very honoured to be representing those people. And truly, truly tragic. I mean, I was just reading the report again this afternoon just before we came on, and very hard to hold back tears even now, 4 years later, just to see how much heartbreak and how much genuine, people were just completely and utterly destroyed, in many, many ways. And it was an honour for us to take their voices and represent their in the entirety for the education sector.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that's been replicated all over the world. I mean, that's Australia, Canada, everywhere, UK. I mean, we've seen it pretty much everywhere. So I guess, you came into the process initially quite naively. And I mean, Ursula, you said something valid about having that on the public record. So, I mean, is there a public record? Are these protocols public in perpetuity, or it's basically up until the government decides there's no public interest?
I think a lot of the evidence has been posted on other platforms in open formats, freely given away, and in some cases people have commercially sold them, unfortunately. But yeah, most of the evidence from our kind of freedom movement, for want of a better word, is on multiple platforms. And so, like other places, like the biology phenom, has done a fabulous job on various platforms, including Substack, in terms of capturing the evidence, in that case, from the Scottish Covid Enquiry and the UK Covid Enquiry, which, by the way, is very similar in terms of its terms of reference. It was all framed along this phrase: what are the lessons that we've learned? Basically, what should we do next time we've got a pandemic, as Bill Gates said, we'll get people's attention then, or whatever his phrase was. So, it was very contrived. Yes, it's still going on. We'll have the report in February. We're not holding our breaths. We'll maybe talk about the actual individuals that are involved, because that's had an impact on, the actual commissioners themselves. That's had an impact on how we feel about it. That's changed over the last few years. But yeah, it's on the public record, Michael, to answer your question. It's there in black and white, in lots of different formats, on lots of different platforms. It ain't going away. They're not gonna memory hole what has happened over the last 5 years. if we've got anything to do with it. And I think between us, we're pretty determined, aren't we, ladies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, and as your little clip showed, Michael, is that there was a prevailing pro-vaccine narrative. But what our submissions and our work today has shown is that we as a group, and the teachers as a group, and Ursula and all the other people, we are aware of the ethical and clinical problems raised by the mandates. So, you know, and as clinicians, we've applied substantial scientific and nursing knowledge to make a comprehensive assessment and determine decisions. And that is all on record. So whilst they're laughing at us now, and while they're professionally ignoring us and turning away from us and dismissing us, it's on record, and it's on record in such a way that is professional. It is research-based and evidence-based. You know, it is, they can't deny the experiences of the hundreds of nurses and the hundreds of teachers that were impacted by what happened. You know, it's written down, and we've aligned it with research that we found from across the globe that tells the same story. So, you know, it might not happen next February when the results of the inquiry come out, but for history, it's been recorded. So it might be our grandchildren and their children, but it is recorded, and it's recorded very clearly. And somebody, even if it's just one person who reads that, one nurse, one teacher, who reads and understands the harms that's been caused and the ethical issues that have been, you know, raised, the unfair discrimination of the nurses and teachers, you know, they were shunned, they were censored, they were shamed, they were bullied by the colleagues and by others. Informed consent was ignored. Procedures for attempting to get the exemptions were flawed, corrupt, or completely absent. You know, unethical manipulation by the nudge unit. And I know that's Ursula's, you know, expertise, but, you know, all the people that's helped us in our submission, they were all negatively impacted by the vaccine mandates. And these were highly qualified and experienced healthcare professionals. Yes, the majority were women. That doesn't mean anything, but they were. The majority were over the age of 50, and the majority have been in nursing for more than 30 years. Now, there's a reason why that cohort of women didn't get mandated, why they joined our organisation, and why they stood up to the coercion and bullying. Perhaps because they didn't have large mortgages, perhaps because they saw the truth. I don't know, but I'm just so glad they did.
No,
Yeah,
and sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I just want to pick up on the exemption part, because as you said initially, we were quite hopeful that this would all be disseminated quite fairly. But the thing that really made me wake up actually was around the exemption clause, because I actually do have a medical condition that prevented me from taking the vaccine, and I was actually terminated regardless. And my doctor, well, I don't really have a doctor, if I'm honest, because I do my best to stay away from doctors' offices. But I went to the doctor that was in my area at the time, and quite typical to a lot of people in my circumstance, I've got anaphylactic, but my situation is undiagnosed triggers. And what became a typical response was, we were told by the doctor that no problem, we'll write you a letter, you can go up to the A&E, you can have the COVID vaccine in an emergency situation with a backup crash cart. And he said to me, he actually said to me, don't worry, if you die, we'll bring you back to life. And I was just like, that was a wake up. That was the thing that really woke me up, and thought, there's something not right about this, because I've never ever had a doctor tell me that, you know, put your life at risk. And so yeah, that was a real wake up.
Yeah, well, first do no harm, right? I mean, first do no harm. First, like, it's better not to treat at all, right? But just do no harm. And wow. Okay, all right. So I guess before we move on, I do want to touch on something, because I think it's relevant in the New Zealand context, and I think it's relevant for other jurisdictions as well. So obviously, when we had, you know, the COVID, like, you know, peak mayhem, right? We had a Labour government, right? Jacinta was, like, you know, Labour Prime Minister, and then Labour lost the elections. And the Conservatives came. Well, I think you call them the Country Party, or the Nationals, or whatever you call them. And the Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, who's supposedly like, pro-freedom and stuff like that. And hey, wow, I mean, we voted right. Things are going to change. We won, right? So what happened?
That's a great question. What indeed happened? It's interesting because we've been working very closely with a number of different groups that are connected with New Zealand First, who is the one that, they're the Freedom Party, if ever there was one. And for a few weeks prior to the election, they really courted the Freedom population's vote, promising the earth, essentially. And yes, they have made some changes. But they always say, where we're from in England, they say the proof is in the pudding. And basically, today we haven't actually seen any real change, anything that's really tangible. Human rights are still impacted. Nurses and teachers still, if they can't go back to work because there's policies in place, specifically private employers, it's not being addressed, and they've talked about it and they've made some really nice sounds and noises around dealing with it, but to date there's not been a blanket, this is terrible, it needs sorting out. So the next election comes up next year, and it's going to be really, really interesting what happens, whether the coalition or a part of the coalition, I don't know, but it certainly makes you realise that determine that our salvation is not in politics. It's not. We've got to manage ourselves, our own communities. We've got to do it ourselves and based on our own truth, because nobody's coming to save us. The political parties aren't going to come and save us, because again, they're fighting corruption in the courts. They're fighting corruption in the police, fighting corruption in the bureaucrats that actually manage the parliament and the government. So we're just battling. But, we've stood up before. We stood up in 2021 and we stood in our truth, and we're not going to be removed from that going forward. Yes, it might be a different battle. It might be couched as something else, but, we are determined. And the interesting thing that I've learned from this whole process is just to trust yourself and your close group of advisors, but to be very cautious when it comes to who you align yourself with, even if they're on your apparent side of the movement, because not everybody, they might be going in the same direction, but not everybody's got the same agenda. So it's been it's an ongoing talk about the Royal Inquiry, lessons learned, for us nurses, teachers, Ursula, it's lessons learned almost every day. We learn something new about ourselves and about the world around us. But, but in this space, we stand, and I suspect when we started the nurses group, we asked for an apology. That's what we wanted. We wanted an apology to all those people that were cruelly mandated and their lifelong careers ripped out from underneath them. Then as time went on, it was an apology, and we want our jobs back. And then fast forward 2 years, we want an apology, we want our jobs back, and we want some money for the absolute trauma you've caused us. So we've kind of grown and got a bit bolshier, kind of got a bit more our wits about us. We're probably not going to get any of those things, but that is what should happen. Absolutely. And all this these employers that are still putting in their own policy, trying to restrict nurses to go back and teachers to go back, and like Kathryn was saying to us earlier today, the boards, the school trustee boards, they're putting policies into place that prevent teachers from going back unless they're vaccinated. That needs to go, and it shouldn't need a Royal Inquiry to dictate that. It should be a given. That's human rights.
So that's still the case now. So teachers who want their job back are or maybe Kathryn will be the best one to answer that. So teachers who want their job back right now in late 2025 are told, if you want to go get your job back, go and get 2 Pfizer vaccines, right? Is that happening right now?
Yeah, look, it depends on the school and the school board, because there's a lack of guidance and expectations from the central government around how it's supposed to be disseminated now, 5 years down the track. Many schools and employers are developing their own internal policies, so there's a real inconsistency around rehiring practices. So it really does depend on the school. But I have heard from a lot of mandated teachers that they have either too traumatized to go back into the state sector, and that's actually me, if I'm honest, because I'm so lacking in trust that I don't, I'm not sure it was going to all happen again. So I feel really hesitant to go back into the state sector. But then there's also teachers who have actually genuinely tried to get back in, and they've been denied.
So denied on what grounds? So say, for example, if you you say, well, I want, if you did want to go back to the state system and you wanted your job back, right? I mean, what would they say to you in terms of what you need to do?
Well, you're not likely to get an interview for a start. It's, around a job that's just around the actual employment process that they follow. And I would imagine if we suspect there's a hidden agenda, we can't prove it, but we do wonder if we've been flagged in some capacity, because there's certainly a wall for many people.
Right, so that's you personally, right? You specifically. So you, Kathryn, not generally a mandated teacher.
Oh, not me, because I've never tried to get back into the state sector.
Right.
But I do know others that have. And they haven't been successful. Some have. There are definitely some that have returned, but I suspect those people have been fortunate with the leadership team who are existing in the school, who have either been empathetic or have a relationship with that particular teacher, and they've allowed them back in. But there's a lot that is not the case.
Right. Okay.
I think it's just worth adding that, because we've got an international audience here, I know that New Zealand is a very sparse, small population, and there's only, we always say there's only ever 2 degrees of connection. And so somebody will know somebody who is applying for a job or on a board in a school or, on a panel in a hospital interviewing or just looking at the application forms, and that is often enough to just swipe that person off the short list.
I mean, there's actually only 2,500 schools in New Zealand, so that's the whole of New Zealand, just over that. So that's not a lot, really. So definitely, there's a lot of collaboration that happens at the leadership levels.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned, Kathryn, I think that's an important point. So there is no guidance from the the central government, right? In Wellington, right? As far as okay, well, the pandemic is over. It's not enough with the nonsense. And I mean, I guess from their perspective, from a purely political framework or a viewpoint, I mean, they can do that because they didn't do any of those harms. It was the other guys. They're evil. Now we're we're the good guys. We've come in to fix it. So they've chosen not to do that. Now they've chosen not to do that for 2 reasons that I can think of. One is incompetence, and that's also directly related to the COVID inquiry. So that's incompetence. That's pretty bad. Or the other reason is malice, which is significantly worse. So what do you think is in play here? Because I mean, they're not connected in any way with what Jacinta's government has done and Skippy and all these people, right? I think the chief health officer, so Bloomfield, I think he's also being replaced. So it's all different people now, right? So they can say, look, I mean, those people have done the wrong thing. You did the right thing voting for us, right? We're the good guys. They were the bad guys. They're the leftists. We're the conservatives. Now we're in charge. We're going to fix everything, right? But that's not what has happened, right? So what do you think is going on here? Is it incompetence or is it malice?
Well, given the fact that I have very little trust, I would say it's malice. But I mean, I think really it just comes down to creating this sort of vacuum where mass confusion occurs. And when you have mass confusion, and as a school leader, I know if you don't have answers, and particularly guidance around those sorts of big, important things, then you get with your board and you develop what you think is best. And I'm guessing that that's what's happening. They're just developing their own internal policies based on what they believe or what they think as a school or a community. And very often those boards are not actually representative of their communities, but unfortunately they're the ones that have the power to do that.
And if I could just jump in there, I think Kathryn's quite right that during COVID, so much was said by the health professionals, by the Ministry of Health, by Bloomfield, by people in preferred positions within health, but they've never once come back and undone what they said. They've never said the pandemic is over. They've never said it's no longer a risk. So those things are still left floating around. So when that trickles down back into communities like you, and I'm just thinking of some nurses that contacted me last week that were asking about a private employer, an aged care employer, who is still asking for the vaccination, the COVID vaccination. And so because the government has never said formally, other than we've ended the mandates, but they've never said that you don't, nobody else needs to have the mandates. You don't need to have the COVID vaccine to work safely as a nurse. It's never been undone. The damage they've done has never been undone. And this government is implicit in that it has not firmly stated what the new direction needs to be. They changed their mind which way during COVID. Do this, do that, don't wash your hands, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. But they've never come. So a lot of people are confused, including the smaller school boards, including the smaller employers. But also now it kind of rolls itself into this, you know, the implications on human rights and things, Michael, which I know you and Ursula have discussed and you're really well aware about, and informed consent, because these are issues that in essence are bigger than any one government, bigger than a coalition government, bigger than the Beehive in Wellington. These are worldwide issues, you know, the worldwide sovereignty, health sovereignty, personal sovereignty. So for the government to step in and do something about it, it would have to deal with some massive issues, and it's woefully unprepared and not able to do that. And I volunteer that all us four put ourselves forward and we'll deal with it for them, because actually fundamental issues, everybody has informed consent, everybody gets to say no. You know, people have got the right to make a decision about their life, their work, their vocation. And the government just needs to step into that space, but it won't, because it's fearful of the bigger picture.
Well said, Deb. Fantastic. Totally agree. I think it's just worth backtracking a little bit to what Kath just said about the applications for employment, etc. Because one thing that we did uncover through Official Information Act requests was that the government lawyers, who I've written about extensively in terms of lawfare in New Zealand, there's actually 10 of the largest law firms in New Zealand that all belong to the same company, would you believe? So they're sharing information, obviously, between each other that perhaps normally would be privileged, professional privilege information. But what we did discover through one of the Official Information Act requests was that these lawyers sent template letters to the boards of all of the New Zealand schools, suggesting that these were the letters that they would use when they fired those teachers who did not comply.
Yeah. That, and in actual fact, that was my first indicator of how seriously they're taking this, because for quite some time I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm going to get an exemption, I'm going to be fine. And when I read that letter, that was my first, reading that letter that was sent from the Ministry of Education to say, this is what you need to give out to your staff if they don't comply. Well, of course, I was reading it, this is what's going to happen to me. Yeah. And of course, I did have vaccine hesitant staff as well. But that was my first indicator. Wow, this is actually way, way bigger than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that again brings us to the the discussion about incompetence versus malice, and I think it is an important point, because I mean, incompetence can be forgiven, malice cannot. All right. So I think in the case of New Zealand, it is very, very important, I guess, to separate the timeline, the COVID timeline, to Jacinda's era or the Labour era, because the guy that came after her is obviously the same, and the new government, right? Because why I guess I insist on that, because I guess you have the example to some extent in the Canadian province of Alberta, right, where they had a conservative premier coming in, Danielle Smith, and at the time she made all the right sounds and moves. She basically said, "Oh, like, those, like, people that were locked out of society because they refused to take like a vaccination was like, like the people like, during Second World War and stuff like that. And she sacked the chief health officer of Alberta and said, oh, I'm going to get a new health advice and I'm going to do things differently. Right. I mean, we can argue what has happened after that and whether really anything has happened. And I guess also, like, it is very, very unlikely, right, for a government to admit its own faults, right? So whether it'll be, Jacinta, I'm happy to say that she's a psychopath, so that would never happen. But I mean, the guy that came after her could have said, oh, look, maybe we've made mistakes, right? But again, he was a deputy, so it's the same party, and there's political considerations, and it's coming to an elections and blah, 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 right? And then the new guys came along, right? So they had nothing to do with anything, right? They could easily, right, especially Winston Peters, right, could easily position themselves as the saviors of the, like, the people of New Zealand. Look, mistakes were made. We're going to fix this. It will never happen again. You've done the right thing for voting for us. Now, this is the government that has set up the current New Zealand inquiry. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, that inquiry, right, just like the previous one supposedly set up by the previous government, is also a sham. That's pretty obvious now. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was that inquiry, the new one set up by the Conservative government, right? Was that one a sham because it was like organized in a shoddy manner and it was incompetence? Or was there just was there malice? Was there a malicious intent to basically, we let people air their grievances, but nothing's going to happen? Especially, and I think it's important to mention, obviously, I mean, this is not some theoretic discussion. We spend too much money on like a new government website and we need to make sure how we don't spend so much money on consultants in the future. People have actually been hurt, right? I mean, people have died, people have been injured, right? So this is serious stuff. Right. So, I mean, you obviously, mentioned in your submissions, the adverse events and all that sort of stuff, which is the key. I mean, forget about giving people their jobs. I mean, people were hurt. Like, people were actually hurt. Like, in some cases, people were killed. Right. How do we prevent something like that from happening again? So how was that received? How was that, idea of, we need to look at the adverse events. We need to, think of compensation. We need to think okay, how are we going to change the policy? Maybe we need legislation changes. Maybe I know that New Zealand doesn't have a constitution, but maybe we need to put something in place, like some measures, legislative measures, that something like that can never happen again. I don't know. What do you think, ladies? I
mean, from my perspective, we should not need, and I think I referred to this earlier, we should not need a Royal Commission of Inquiry to work out what went wrong or to even learn the lessons. But I know that, as Ursula said, that is how they're going to manage the next big disaster or pandemic or whatever that looks like. But, when the healthcare workers' rights to freedom of thought, freedom of speech, opinion, conscience and religion, when those mandates overrode our personal beliefs in medical autonomy, it should be the role of any government at all times to uphold that. They shouldn't need permission from an ever-changing group of commissioners to do their job. So that is why we know that one of the reasons we know this Royal Commission of Inquiry will not be effective, because any government worth its salt should stand in that space and protect its population, especially when we are seeing that the health system currently is in tatters, not only because of the shortages on the workforce, significant job losses, early retirements, many experienced professionals leaving, which exacerbated the workforce shortages, but the impact on patient care. So they shouldn't have to wait for a tick box exercise by a few lawyers that are probably very nice people, but have got specific terms of reference. They should be able to say, right, we're going to reinstate all our staff. We're going to review all our workforce policies to make sure this never happens again. We're going to ensure all fair treatment for all healthcare workers. It should not need a document to be enforced upon the government. And that is where I think our government is weak. Any government that's gone down this road is weak. You do what's right. End of.
Here. Look, I think you touched on an important point, and I think it's worth expanding on that. I mean, I think some people may not know that, but I mean, New Zealand is quite a small country, like, population-wise, right? It's 5.5 million people, even though it's the same size as the UK. So there's not a lot of people, right? And obviously, you mentioned, Deb, I mean, there's a significant, like, brain drain now in, like, the nursing sector and other, like, allied health, I would imagine. So anything that was mandated, I think, Kathryn, I mean, you mentioned, like, in teachers, that would be the same. I mean, you even mentioned yourself, you will never go back into the state system. So I guess, this is going to have, and obviously, we've just discussed, a new government came in and nothing changed. So what are the long-term implications for New Zealand as a result of, like, losing all these, like, highly qualified staff with, like, decades of experience, like, multiple degrees, like extensive, like, knowledge?
Catastrophic, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry, Ursula, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say briefly about the teacher education aspect, because obviously that's my background, is in education, teaching teachers. And even 10 years ago, when I was forced out of that situation for being a whistleblower, basically, of the poor quality education that was happening there, you could see then the cycle of the problem of poor quality teacher education leading to poor quality teaching, leading to poor outcomes in the classroom, and therefore, the long-term educational outcomes when they got to university. And so it's no wonder really that the university, I mean, that's the other thing about our sparse population. How can we possibly, as a small country with 5 million people, sustain 8 universities? That is just totally ridiculous, right? From the beginning, from the get-go, let alone in our current economic situation. So it's no wonder that the Chinese population, for instance, who, by the way, do want to exit China, despite what some commentators would like to promote, they get a student visa to come to New Zealand to study here because the universities are poor quality, for some of the reasons that I've just pointed out. And they know that if they stay on at university, chances are they will be granted citizenship. And that is a route to staying in New Zealand and then perhaps going to Australia, and earning even better wages and maybe having a better quality of life. So, and I think the whole thing is just totally broken in terms of the workforce, and not only the workforce, but a highly educated, well-experienced, sensible workforce that has some integrity and has some ethics behind it. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I'm curious. Sorry, so you mentioned, like, obviously there's a lot of, like, new universities in New Zealand, like, compared to, like, the size of the population. So I don't know if you have this information off your hand, but I mean, what is, like, the breakdown between, like, I guess, domestic Kiwi students and international students in, like, some of the, like, major universities?
It varies a lot. I mean, we can talk about this separately, but it definitely varies. One of the interesting things that causes that tension is the metrics which, sort of almost promote or certainly allow these universities to shout from the rooftops about how great they are in the league tables of universities, because one of the metrics is the ratio of students to lecturers. And so in a sparse population, you can say one of the metrics is overseas students and overseas lecturers. That gives you brownie points, right? One of the other metrics is the ratio, as I say, of lecturers to students. And so automatically the New Zealand universities look good on paper, even though their educational outcomes might be poor. So that's a way of them selling themselves, especially to Chinese students, who want a better quality of life. Kathryn, you were going to say something. Sorry.
No, you're right. I was just going to comment about the fears I have around the future of our society in general, actually, because our education rates plummeted significantly in terms of attendance, and it went as low as 40%, I believe. In fact, in some like Māori populations, it was down to about 10% of students attending school. And I don't believe it's actually improved significantly. I still think the numbers are very low in terms of getting students back to school, because they've been off for so long and there were so many interruptions during the COVID era. And I also know that, just saw a headline the other day, in fact a couple of days ago, around 1,000 principals, keeping in mind that New Zealand schools, there's only about 2,500 schools in New Zealand in its entirety. 1,000 principals have resigned in the last 3 years. So in terms of sustainability of leadership and actual, because at the end of the day, it's the principals that guide and direct the curriculum and, keep everything stable in terms of the school culture. If you've got that kind of a high turnover, it doesn't bode well for educational learning. And I do have grave concerns about the future of our country in that way.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. It's worth just pointing out that a couple of my recent Substacks I have named and shamed, although I hate doing that, some of the senior leaders, if you want to call them that, who have received copies of our COVID inquiry submissions from the various groups and done nothing, not even acknowledged, let alone, got in contact with us or given us any element of support. One of those people who I've named and shamed, I don't mind saying, is Mike Pettit. And he is one of those principals who has recently left the school because guess what? He's become our mayor in our local region. He was elected to the new mayor. Now, he knows about the COVID era mandates. He obviously knows that some of his staff were forced to leave. I don't know whether they were forced to leave by him personally or they felt coerced or whatever. I would love to know the details of that. But he's a classic example of this. Well, he actually said to me in an email, Ursula, that's all in the past. We've got to move on. I don't want to discuss it. I don't want to go there. Thank you for the report. Goodbye. And now he's our mayor, so it's extremely worrying that these, relatively high level people in our society, in our communities, he's highly respected enough to be elected to a new mayor. That should surely give him enough confidence to say, do you know what? I'm never going to allow these COVID era vaccine mandates to happen again in any school that my kids go to, that my wife works at, that I'm a principal at, or whatever, in our area. But nothing is said. The silence is deafening, as we keep saying. The silence is deafening.
And therein lies the problem, doesn't it? That what happened during COVID didn't happen in a silo. We think it did because we think 2020, the Wuhan virus, the vaccinations mandates, the whole thing. But actually, and I know Ursula has discussed this on many occasions, that gradual decline of academic freedom and what, as nurses, what we're taught in university, because now it's a university education, we're told to think between this parameter and this parameter. We're not allowed to think outside the box, even though nurses think they are autonomous, independent practitioners. Actually, they've been cut off at the knees, because if they were autonomous, independent practitioners with the capacity to think and to act on what they found, and if we worked in a system that valued ethical practice and informed consent, we wouldn't have ended up where we ended up in New Zealand. A classic example would be what happened in other countries around the world, where the nurses said, wait a minute, something's not right, we're not going to do this. But in New Zealand, and it has to start with universities, it has to start with what we're being told and how to think, and how much of a puppet score we give people, because that's essentially, are you being given a certificate that says, this is how much of a puppet I am, this is how much of a puppet you are. So in essence, we're undervaluing nursing education, because they're just basically getting a certificate for churning out a diatribe that is actually worthless, useless in the real world. It's okay having compassion and fairness and learning from past challenges, but if we want to build that strong, more inclusive healthcare sector, we've got to start looking at some of these hard questions and these hard things and dealing with the issues that this government should be dealing with now, but they can't. So they pass it down to the leaders of the academic institutions, they to the Ministry of Health, but they can't deal with it either, because they're bought and sold by whoever's pulling their chains and whoever is doing the puppeteering on them. So I'm not hopeful about the future of nursing in New Zealand, because it's fallen at what would be potentially a very small obstacle, because something will come that will be bigger. There'll be more demands made upon our psyche, upon our emotions, upon our willpower. This was a small test. And essentially, most nurses failed because they didn't stand up for themselves. They didn't stand up for their patients. We've now got nurses that have got vaccine injuries. They're seeing the healthcare system being flooded with vaccine injuries, and they're all looking the other way. They're ignoring it. They're not acknowledging what they're seeing. So they still continue to fail. They failed then, they're failing now. So what is the hope in this scenario? What would success look like? I'm kind of losing an understanding of because there's so many different fires that we're fighting now, and nurses, I do not believe, and they're not helping themselves. Yeah, they become nurse practitioners. Yeah, we can now prescribe. Yeah, we get more money. Yeah, we not the doctor's handmaiden, but we have lost so many basic fundamentals that would essentially, like in teaching, put the heart back into our professions.
Okay, so look, I mean, the way I see it is like, I guess there's two sides where, like, there should have been some kind of a pushback, right? And I mean, obviously you mentioned one side, and you should have, like, ethical professionals who understand, like, what their actual job is, what is their responsibility to their patients. I don't know if, like, I just don't know if, like, nurses give, like, a Hippocratic oath like the doctors do, if they go through that process or not. But either way, I mean, they should understand that, like, injecting something to someone that is experimental and that person doesn't even understand what they're being injected and what are the potential risks. Like, I mean, I'm not a nurse or a medical professional or of any kind, and I understand that that's not so I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But I guess that's one side. The other side is you need to have, like, the regulator, right, to regulate that. And we had in Australia, I mean, we had the Fair Work Commission that was supposed to do something about, like, our workplace mandates, and did nothing. Obviously, we had all the medical regulatory bodies, like, TGA, APRA, and all that sort of stuff that have done, not only that they've done bugger all, they've actually, like, they were the ones that enforced things, right? So with the inquiry that was happening in New Zealand, I mean, was it part of their remit? Because, like, they can do something about it. Was it part of their remit to look at the actual regulatory regime and, like, figure out, okay, how do we do things, like, better in the future? Like, maybe some regulatory bodies need to be restructured. Maybe they need to become more independent, not be part of a government department. Maybe have their own source of funding. Maybe even, like, have like a private membership. You can choose whether you want to be a member, and then your membership funds the operations. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a massive question, and probably another podcast, Michael. But just going back slightly, and we were very clever when we did our submission, because we based our submission around the New Zealand Nursing Council Code of Conduct. So they couldn't come back and said that we hadn't applied our competencies as nurses. Now, the Nursing Code of Conduct is that do no harm, essentially. And it's framed around 4 core values: respect, trust, and partnership, and integrity. Now, any one of those words would automatically put us on high alert that if a patient or a nurse or a colleague doesn't want to take an emergency use treatment, they shouldn't have to. But without the public's trust and confidence in the profession, nurses cannot fulfill their role effectively. So we've got a massive issue here that people are being coerced with Kentucky Fried Chicken vouchers, with petrol vouchers, come and have your vaccine, get a free burger on us. So straight away, nursing, the respect, the trust, the partnership, and the integrity is being undermined. And nursing will not succeed based on that. Now, with the nursing regulatory bodies, we very early went to the Nursing Council in New Zealand and said, hey, what can you do to protect your nurses? Because your role as Nursing Council is to keep the public safe. Invariably, we are the public when we're not nurses. You're not keeping us safe. You're not protecting us as nurses and making sure that we can do our jobs properly and keep the public safe. What are you going to do about it? And they basically washed their hands. That's not our job. we're following the government mandates, so we can't help you. So they wash their hands. Now, we have explicitly put in the recommendations of our report, and I suspect Kathryn's done something similar, that we want the regulatory role of nursing council to be investigated to see what they could do differently, especially with regards to those nurses that they didn't protect, that got the vaccine and were subsequently injured. Now, just to finish off my little blurb here about, regulatory bodies, there's a whole a process underway in New Zealand at the moment under the coalition government that's looking at bringing together all the regulatory bodies of all the healthcare practitioners under the Healthcare Practitioner Competency Act. So, but the problem with doing that, the problem with bringing it all into one body would mean government control. And so whilst they're independent and they stand alone, they may have some chance of saying, no, Mr. Government Man, we don't believe what you're doing is correct. They didn't, but they could have done. They could have called out and said, hey, this isn't fair on our nurses. They didn't. But given if they were all under one regulatory body, if there was any changes the government would be making, it would be towards a singular healthcare practitioner regulatory body, which, guess what, gives the government more control. So that isn't the answer either. Yeah. The only answer would be an independent, and we discussed this yesterday, an independent regulatory bodies where people can choose to belong to an organisation that clearly aligns with their frame of reference and with their values. But unfortunately, in New Zealand, they are statutory organisations and they're limited or dictated by law. So you can't just set up a new organisation. It's got to be done through statutory processes. So it's a very difficult one, but we have explicitly named the Nursing Council as, they've got to do this. It's questions have got to be asked. Now, I don't for 1 minute think the Royal Inquiry will go after Nursing Council, just like they won't go after the unions who stood by and saw hundreds of nurses injured. Nothing's going to happen, or I'd be very surprised, but I really would err on the side of caution. Nothing's going to happen because, again, they've done nothing to remedy their actions and they've had 4 years.
And that raises, I guess, an issue, another issue, and that's an issue that is across the board also in Australia and I think in the US as well, that really, I mean, there's like one professional body, right? That if you're a nurse, this is your professional body. Whether you don't like that professional body, whether you think that the leaders of that professional body are incompetent, whether those leaders have done the wrong thing by you, and you don't want to be a member of that body, well, sorry, there's no other option. There were attempts in Australia, to start like an alternative professional body, but they have no standing. You know what I mean? So they're not even recognized, and it's kind of funny where obviously the professional bodies are very, very close with the government. The regulatory bodies, they are the government. They get their money from the government. Yeah. So it's kind of like an absurd situation where they're expected to police themselves, and people think that they're going to stay like independent and impartial. So that's just ridiculous. And I think the New Zealand example is a good one, but it applies really anywhere. Because if you're an organization that gets your funding from the government, how would you go against the government? That just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. I guess I want to ask you, Kathryn. So you've also obviously mentioned the impact that mandates had on teachers, and still have an impact to this day. Like a lot of teachers still can go back to work, or they have like very onerous requirements on them, to go back to work. But what was the impact on the other side? What was the impact on the students and their families?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it depended on the community, but I think every single school would have had some parents and families that would have been quite shocked at what happened, particularly because we weren't allowed to talk about it leading up to the 15th of November. And so I had a number of parents that came to me and said, hey, who's going to be leaving? Who's going? And I said, well, we can't talk about that. I said, you'll find out on the 16th of November as to whether, who turns up. And as it turned out in my school community, I was the one that didn't turn up. So, but we had no opportunity to farewell our students. We couldn't talk to our staff. It was just everyone was just completely silent. So on the 16th of November, every school would have had, not every school, but a lot of schools had missing staff members, and there was no opportunity to farewell, to say goodbye to your staff or your students. It was really, really hard.
That was one of the worst sections of both of the reports that we co-wrote for the COVID Enquiry was the grief that the nurses felt and the teachers felt. Simply, the most simple thing, being able to say goodbye. It wasn't even that necessarily that they'd lost their job and their community of practice and everything else around it, was that literally they were suddenly, thought of as muck on people's shoe, not even allowed to go and pick up their personal belongings from their desk. Yeah. It was just the most inhumane treatment that people were suffering, and no acknowledgement, even to this day. Colleagues who still haven't got in contact, or literally, it's like you've disappeared off the earth. It's just incredible.
But it's kind of like that. It was like that, like you say, like you've died and you haven't returned. Yeah. But then there was also the public humiliation, because the whole process was extremely public. It was like, okay, let's see who in New Zealand in the teaching sector or in the nursing sector or health and education sectors, let's see who's disobeyed the government.
Yeah.
Definitely, I can relate. It's almost like, once you're gone, it's like, it's not that you've died. It's like you can't be talked about. It's like you've never existed. Like we can't talk about that person because they got in trouble with the government. It's like it's like literally like a communist regime. Like someone came to you in the middle of the night and disappeared you, and you're gone. You're not like everyone else. The neighbors, even your own family members, they're not allowed to talk about you. You didn't exist. No, we don't know anything. Never happened. We don't know who that person is. Right? Mm-hmm. That's basically what it is. And I guess, there's still significant staff shortages in the education sector and obviously in the nursing sector. But in the education sector right now in New Zealand, and how does that impact kids now? Does that mean that there's bigger classrooms now, more students per teacher? How does that work?
Mm.
Look, to be honest with you, I'm sort of out of it now. But I would imagine you're absolutely right. It's a case of bigger classrooms, but you've also got to remember there's still a big problem with attendance. We still don't have attendance sorted by a long shot. But yeah, definitely. I do know the government have advertised for teachers overseas. We've lost a lot of teachers to Australia. Same with nurses. But that's hard to compete with as well, because the packages are so much more attractive in Australia than what we can offer here. So that's another dilemma.
Mm.
Right. Okay. All right. I guess the next question, I think I'll ask you, Ursula, because you kind of have a bit of expertise, quite a bit of expertise on that, and that's around behavioral science techniques and the various nudge units that operated during the mandates, and I think to some extent still operate today in New Zealand. And you've done quite a lot of work on that. So can you talk a little bit about that? What techniques, what organizations were behind them, and what is kind of still in place today?
Yeah, so I have written quite a few Substacks about the Official Information Act requests that revealed the backstory, basically, to what happened. And one of those many backstories was the fact that they had a pilot study, the government did, the Jacinda Ardern government. They had a pilot study that ran for approximately 6 weeks with 6 of the top 10 commercial, big commercial companies in New Zealand, including Fonterra, Main Freight, and the Warehouse Group, which everybody in New Zealand will probably recognise. And it was basically an investigation into how they could coerce that staff, that massive staff, and their families into getting the jab. And so they gave them various incentives. They played them lots of marketing. They put signs all around their staff room. They had on-site so-called vaccination centres, so they didn't have to go off-site. They had them there at the workplace. They didn't have to book time off. In fact, they were given extra days off. They didn't have to take sick days or holiday leaves if they had an adverse event when they got jabbed. They had free time off. Imagine that, how generous of the government.
Oh.
And they had gift vouchers. They had all kinds of, totally unethical things, including come along to get your jab whilst you're at work, and also bring your family members, because you're so special. This is the thing, right? The way that the propaganda works is they make you a bit like a coercive partner. They will make you feel very special if you're given special treatment, if you wrap it up in a way that, look, this vaccination, so-called vaccination, is in limited supply. And this relationship that your employer has with the government is so fantastic. They have given special provision for us. How lucky are we? And we pass that on to our staff because we care about you. You know, this is what people say. We care about the staff. You know, we look after them, we give them holidays, etc., etc. So that ran for about, as I say, about 6 weeks. And they tweaked the various aspects of the coercion. And then a few weeks later, that was when the vaccination mandate, the vaccination order was initiated on the public sector. And they copied and pasted it, basically, because they knew what worked and what didn't. And it was incredible to read what they had done and how they had presented it in such an unethical way. Shocking, actually.
Yeah, look, it's interesting what you say. I mean, they presented it as, look, we're doing it because we care about you. We're looking after your well-being. And I mean, obviously, I don't know if you ladies are aware, but today is December 10th. That's the social media ban kicks in Australia.
Yeah.
And I mean, the word I shared it in an article that I published, I think, over the weekend. But I mean, there was the front page, right, of the Courier Mail, which is like the newspaper in Queensland, belongs to News Corp. Right, well, basically, let's protect the generation. Let's save the generation. Yeah. And even today, Albanese, in the morning, when it all started, he went on his rounds in the morning and said, yeah, we're doing that to protect the kids. This will be like a landmark thing and stuff like that. So what I'm saying here is basically the same techniques are being used again.
Yeah.
They've already started being used in Australia. Exactly the same. Whether it's protect grandma, protect the NHS, now it's protect the children. Now it's exactly the same. So in Australia, we're already seeing that, right? Other jurisdictions as well, the UK to some extent. Has that already started in New Zealand as well in the context of digital ID, Ursula?
It's slowly creeping in. I think, things like income tax and post office, and certainly with the banks. Yeah, it's getting increasingly difficult to do official business without the real me, or whatever they call it, ID. It's that squeeze, isn't it? It's more convenient if you do it this way. And
vehicle, isn't it? They're going to go for the vehicles as well, though.
Yeah, the vehicles. Yeah. There's all kinds of measures. Yeah,
there's no I guess from the government, and I don't know, maybe Kathryn, you'll be the best to answer that. But I mean, there's no kind of messaging that's starting to creep from the government. Social media is a very dangerous place. Kids shouldn't be on social media. We need to start regulating that. That will affect their development. Going on Facebook and Snapchat, and it's not good, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe big daddy government, we're going to intervene. And we're the good guys. We're going to look after you, and maybe kids shouldn't be on social media. Has that already kind of that messaging has already started creeping in New Zealand?
A little bit. I saw it they've already, as they always do. They always get celebrities involved, and we've got is it Gemma McCaw? So she's started to do some education around the harms of social media. Yeah, it's probably not as strong because we're kind of watching what's happening in Australia, but you can tell it's definitely they're launching it. They're getting ready to go there. Yes.
Yeah,
it's certainly happening in the health field as well. So I noticed that in Australia at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, is that children's vaccinations are being tied with some benefits, and there was an article
for several years. Yes.
Yeah. There was an article this morning in New Zealand. Would we be able to do something like that here? And it's interesting because a lot of people have commented saying, have you forgotten what happened during COVID? You stepped in, the government tried to bring in these overarching policies that did away with personal freedoms, and look how it went badly wrong. So there is a lot of comment, but I think it's inevitable. I think it will happen. I think social media, they'll come after it in New Zealand, because Australia kind of sets the tone, doesn't it? And if it works there, then they'll try it here. I think it's going to happen. And it's very sad, but this is that totalitarianism government, isn't it? Across the world, this is kind of where it's all channeling to, the World Economic Forum and all those other things which conspiracy theorists talk about, but actually they're very right, because they're very real entities and they are trying to control every aspect of our life. So we've got to start with what we can control, the little bit of our field of vision, that we can manage. It's setting up those things that we can do. And that's what we're doing here today, isn't it? Those things that we can influence is just trying to influence one person, another person, and doing what we can.
Yeah. I was just going to add to just going back to the coercive measures in terms of the ethics of bringing in that vaccination order. It's worth raising awareness, because not many people realise this, that New Zealand never actually had that emergency. What do they call it in America? The emergency
use authorization.
Use authorization. Yeah, they never had that legislation, right? They assumed in Parliament that they had it, that they could use this emergency vaccine and basically roll it out as an experiment on the whole population. That was incorrect, because the legislation that they used said that it could be used, but only for a limited number of people. That was the phrase in the legislation. So what did they do? When they realised their mistake, after they'd rolled it out across the population and millions of people had got jabbed basically illegally without informed consent, they changed the law.
That was my next question. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
They changed the law and they backdated it so that they could get away with making sure, which is unheard of, basically unprecedented. But that's what they did. So going back to your point, Michael, which I think is very relevant now, 5 years on, was it incompetence? Was it malice? There's definitely an element of malice here. They knew full well in Parliament, we've got it in the Hansard, right? Although they didn't publish it immediately, we've got it written down in the Hansard, what happened in that discussion. And those MPs that were present there knew full well that what they had done was wrong, legally and ethically wrong. And
that retrospective change in legislation, also that's just wild. But I mean, that retrospective change in legislation, so that was done by which government?
That was the Labour government. Yeah.
So that was still in the Labour government. So basically, as they were their term was finishing, they said, "Oh, we're just gonna change the rules so nobody can touch us." And I mean, I don't even know how. Anyone? Yeah, sorry.
So I was going to say, it's done in collaboration with everybody else. It was a whole party decision. It wasn't just the Labour government.
No,
nobody
that's
objected. Right. I think one MP might have said something, but he was very quickly shut down. So nobody objected because why would they?
It was the same thing. It's a uni party. There was no opposition.
Uni party in full display. I mean, wow. I mean, if people still don't get it after this, so the Conservative and New Zealand First, they were all in favor, right? Winston Peters, the great freedom fighter, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he wasn't in government at the time.
No, he wasn't.
But he was in Parliament.
No, he wasn't.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't in Parliament at the time. So he did the big comeback based on, because who are you going to vote for when everybody acts like they obviously just acted? So that's one of the things that swung the vote back towards New Zealand First.
Yeah, he visited the Wellington protest. He was the only politician who went to speak to the protesters in Wellington, despite the fact that they were right underneath the government's windows. They kept looking out at us.
Yeah, very cunning.
I want to ask one question, and I don't know if you ladies know that off the top of your head, but the current Prime Minister of New Zealand, how did he vote at the time?
Luxon. There was no opposition.
Was he in favor of retrospective legislative changes to basically cover the government's ass?
He wasn't there in
that government, the opposition, right?
Yeah, he wasn't there for that particular discussion.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they know what happened. They know
I wouldn't have any faith in him. I mean, he said that he said many times that he would have gone harder and faster with the vaccination policies.
Why?
So,
Okay.
So he's definitely not someone.
And
that's
remember, none of the MPs were actually mandated.
That's correct. Yeah.
So they could call the shots, but they didn't have to take them themselves.
That's correct.
Wow. I mean, it was obviously the same thing in Australia. It was the same thing in the US. We do have an international audience, and I just want to for people to stop and think for a moment what is being said here, right? I mean, it's across every single country. It doesn't matter, even if they're supposedly against each other on things that actually matter. They always work they collaborate hand in hand. It's lockstep. Right? That word again, lockstep. People need to understand that because it is important. There's still people think that Trump is going to save us. Or if we're going to vote, it's probably next prime minister in Australia is going to be probably almost certainly, in my opinion, a guy by the name of Andrew Hastie, right? So the Liberals are going to come back after the current clown is deposed, right? So and people say, oh, he's going to save us, right? He's a veteran and he's he speaks well and he's good looking and whatever. Come on, guys. I just it is this is something that I really I'm passionate about because this is the definition of insanity. So for me, this is really frustrating. So sorry to jump on that one, but I mean, this was a really good example.
Yeah,
right? I mean, effective changes to legislation because they knew that they've done something that was illegal, right?
Yeah.
And they knew they could be sued, right? Yeah. And they said, okay, well, it's like literally criminals covering their own crimes. And they're able to do that without anyone being able to. It's basically like you just murdered someone, and you're burying the body in full view of everyone, right? And nobody can stop you.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, that's why they wouldn't turn up to the Royal Commission of Inquiry for investigating questioning either, because it was the same thing that was just done very much en masse, wasn't it? And we had some lame statement come out as to why they weren't going to be representative.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Kathryn. We should have covered, but I know we're coming to the end now. But the commissioners did call Ardern and Chris Hipkins and Bloomfield, etc., to speak, publicly, and they all declined en masse because they'd had legal advice from their wonderful lawyers who said, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You might incriminate yourself.
And yet, did it, and he went over to Scotland, didn't he? And he spoke over here.
Yes.
So that's an important point. That's an important point because I think it's also relevant to Australia. So that COVID inquiry that was called by the current government, was that like a full-blown royal commission where basically they have the power to force someone to appear? If you don't appear, they send people and bring you in handcuffs. Was that kind of inquiry?
Yeah.
Okay, so
but they chose not to.
Coming, and Hipkins said, we're just not coming. And Bloomfield said, well, I'm just not coming. And they said, okay, cool.
Yeah.
No worries, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We're afraid of the public backlash or something was one of Hipkins' responses, wasn't it?
Yeah. And isn't it's so ironic, right? It's so hypocritical that Bloomfield went to the Scottish COVID Enquiry to supposedly give evidence there in public, and yet not at the New Zealand one. And there was Jacinda, I saw the other day on Graham Norton's show, was it? Saying what a wonderful leader she was, but she never comes to New Zealand anymore. Perhaps
she's not safe
here. Yeah.
So
she's not safe in her own country.
Not popular, that's for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to highlight that point again because it is important, and people need to understand what government is and how government operates. So again, that New Zealand COVID inquiry technically had the power to order the former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern to appear either in person or via teleconference and give a testimony under oath. Yeah, they had the power to do that.
Yeah,
correct.
And they chose not to do that.
Well, they were told not to do that. Maybe by their lawyers, probably by the government lawyers.
No, so Ardern was told by her lawyers, right? But the commissioner, the commissioner of this inquiry, right, was supposed to be independent. right? And supposed to be like, represent like, the interests of the truth and then the people and whatever its frame of reference were, right? So I just want, because this is an important point.
Yeah.
So that commissioner had the power and basically said, we want Jacinda Ardern to appear, and just said, oh, look, I'm busy in the UK and I'm under legal advice that I'm not going to give testimony.
Yeah.
And then the commissioner has the power to say, okay, cool, I still want you to come.
Yeah.
And if you don't come, we're gonna demand extradition from the UK and bring you in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Right. So he had the power to do that.
Yeah.
And he had the power to do that for Hipkins, and he had the power to do that for Bluefield, and he's done it for not either of them. And that commissioner was appointed by the Conservative government.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope people understand what I'm trying to say.
Now, one positive, because I know we're coming to the end, and we want to end on a high. One positive is that once this report has been published in February, we will be able to send in our official Information Act requests. So we will get some insight, and I'm not holding my breath on everything being revealed, but we will certainly get to know a little bit about what happened behind the scenes, who gave legal advice when, perhaps what that legal advice was, why they changed staff, because the other thing we haven't talked about is the commissioners themselves. Many of them have resigned and been replaced by people that are basically perhaps just puppets for government, and various other changes have happened over the couple of years that they've been in place. So we will learn more in 2026, regardless of what the report says. It's almost irrelevant what the actual report physically says, because we will get to see some of what happened.
Are you certain of that, though, Ursula?
We will dig. We won't give up.
Yeah. But I mean, is there a chance that you may, like some of your like freedom of information requests, maybe just fobbed off and say, no, this is commercial in confidence, or this is like, not has no public interest, or something along those lines? I mean, has that?
No doubt. Yeah. There's no doubt that some of them won't get anywhere, but just asking them, I think, has some weight. Just if you ask the question, they know that we know that they know. So keep asking, keep prodding, keep poking. We're not going to give up. Truth will win.
Yeah.
Good on you, ladies. Okay, so I guess just to end it here, and we do, I guess, want to end on a positive note. But I mean, obviously, it's like, I think it's obvious to everyone who's like watching and listening that this was a complete farce. Like, I mean, it was set to fail, and I would argue there was definitely malicious intent. That is not incompetence, right? A commissioner that has the power to demand and bring witnesses in handcuffs if necessary, and chose not to exercise that, and that's not a sitting politician anymore. Ardern is not a sitting politician. Hipkins is. But Bloomfield is no longer employed by the government, right? So they chose not to do that. So there is malice here, right? So I hopefully everyone can see that. But I guess, from your perspective, and I mean, you mentioned one thing, Ursula, about potential freedom of information. But I mean, how can this entire sham can still be something positive and something beneficial can be gained from it? And what needs to happen in order for that to actually happen and take place?
Well, Kathryn's writing a very good book. Can I just add that? That's something very, very positive, and because it's funny. we need more humor in the world. So yeah.
We do. But I think for me, my response to that would be making sure that the experiences and the stories of people that were harmed are publicised and are made known, because there's still a lot of people in our country who keep saying, it's over, it's over, it happened 5 years ago, it's in the past, just get over it, will you stop bringing it up? The people that have been harmed will never get over it. We will never get over it, because we are so traumatised, and so we've suffered so much as a result of what happened. So I think the important thing is to get those stories out there.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think that pretty much covers it. But I just want to quickly check if anyone has any comments or questions that they want to ask, I guess, the panel. This would be the time to do that. So you can go. It's interesting. As we were live streaming, I noticed that we were actually kicked off Rumble. So that's interesting.
Were we? That's interesting.
Not sure if it's a technical thing, but I mean, initially it did connect and it showed that it was fine.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But anyway, so Rumble is out of the question, but I'm going to go quickly to Odyssey chat, the Substack chat. And also, if you want your comment displayed on air, everybody, I mean, there's a URL being like scrolling here at the bottom, livestream.actionabletruth.media. If you want your comment actually displayed on air, just go there. You don't need to sign up to any account. Like, you don't need to provide an email address. You don't need to give your real name. Just put whatever you want, and I can show your comments. So I'm just going to leave kind of the floor open for a couple of more minutes and see if anyone has any questions here.
Did you have something to say to that final question? Did you want to add something about what the...
Yeah, I mean, I started off earlier by saying, we wanted an apology. Then we wanted an apology with some reinstatement. Then we wanted reinstatement and some money. But now, we want that an absolute review of non-discriminatory policies and an independent review of the professional bodies. We want informed consent and accountability for harms caused. So, month on month, what we are demanding grows because they haven't dealt with it. And that puts us in the driving seat, because it's like a snowball that gathers snow or a snowman when you're building a snowman. You roll it over, it collects more snow, it gets bigger. As our list of things that are going to address the harms caused gets bigger, we will collect more people, because more people will understand and see, like an apology won't impact many people in New Zealand. But when we ask for respect for informed consent and accountability for harms caused, that automatically collects a few extra thousand people. So, we have got the power. And we just need to keep going until our snowman or our snowball gets so big. And believe you me, when it's 30 degrees outside, we need a snowman. It's going to get so big that it's going to implode. And there will, whether it's via the government, via Wellington, via the Beehive, things will implode, because at some point the people will say, no more. This ends now. And the people will, rise to their innate power.
I think there's one comment here actually in the Substack chat that I noticed, that it's kind of like a very, very good kind of response or a connection to what you just said there, and then like from someone by the name of Omtatsat. It is very difficult for honest, truthful human beings to understand the depth of depravity that murderers will lower themselves. And look, I mean, I know this is not a positive way, I guess, to end this podcast, but from my perspective, I think it's also important that we are realistic and we understand who we're dealing with, right? And that's why I kept pushing and prodding with regards to the power of the commissioner and what has actually happened, right? Because they're all obviously in cahoots with each other, right? He's not gonna like, bring Jacinda Ardern in handcuffs and force her to give a testimony under oath, because they're together, even though he was appointed by the Conservative government who are their enemies. So yes, we absolutely need to keep push and prod, right? But I think from my perspective, I can't see change coming from the government or any of their bodies, including the supposed regulators. The change will have to come from the people. Now, how does that look in specific terms? That varies by country. It depends on, like, the governance system. It I guess varies also to a large extent to how pissed off people are, right? Like, I mean, I think in Australia, people are not pissed off enough. I think in New Zealand, I mean, I've been to New Zealand a couple of times. People are pretty chill there, so they're probably not pissed off enough. In Canada, they're very, very calm people, definitely, but they're starting to get pissed off enough that hopefully things will change there. I don't know. I think the first thing, like, it's like that famous scene from that 1976 movie Network. The first thing you need to do is to get mad. That's the first thing you need to do, from my perspective, right? And say, no, we're not going to take this anymore. First of all, that doesn't really matter. Like, we're not going to take it anymore. So the first step is always to, like, get mad. And after that, things can happen, right? Yeah. Because to me, this is like obvious. I mean, you telling me that this commission, they appointed a royal commission. I mean, royal commission, I think it's the same as in Australia. That's like the highest level. You can't go above a royal commission. Royal Commission has extensive powers, right? And we had a Royal Commission a couple of years ago into the banking sector, right? And they've come up with a set of recommendations and ban commissions for mortgage brokers and all this and all that. And there's there's a famous they went they released 1,000 or 2,000 page report and this is what needs to happen and these are our recommendations. And then the government said, yeah, okay, cool. That was the conservative, the liberal government at the time. And then Labour came and they also said, yeah, cool, okay. So we need to understand that, right? So I think that's important. And we want to be positive, yes, but we also need to understand our predicament. And I think, I don't know. I think as soon as people kind of maybe change their thinking, my hope is that things will actually start changing. I think I'm really glad that I had you ladies on because this COVID inquiry. There's a call in Australia for a Royal Commission into what happened in COVID. And there's a call from even some of the supposedly freedom-minded senators. We need a Royal Commission. We need a Royal Malcolm Roberts come to mind, and I think Alex Antic and people like that. We need a Royal Commission, right? Okay, right. There you go. Here's New Zealand. They had a Royal Commission. What happened? Bugger all.
Yeah.
So, guys, here's an example. New Zealand called a Royal Commission. Doesn't get higher than this when it comes to restitute from the government. Were you compensated? Was anyone's job reinstated? Was policy changed? It seems especially in the school system, every school principal does whatever they want. They're just I'm going to mandate if they want their job back. I'm not going to mandate. So I think my message, just to leave people with that, is that some major things need to change. And if people think that the current structure is the one that's going to change that, well, guys, here's another example from people who were involved, all these three ladies that were intimately involved in the process, right? Intimately involved, dedicated a lot of time and effort to actually make proper submissions, follow the rules, they trust the process, trust the plan, right? And here we are, right? So, I think, I know maybe it's not the most positive message to end this podcast, but it is the truth.
Yeah.
I think system, I think as well as getting angry, we've got to get creative, and we've got to create better systems that are outside of the government. And one thing that's really encouraging I'm seeing is that there's a lot of homeschooling happening in New Zealand, and I'm all for that. I think that's great. That's an example. That's a classic example. People that are unhappy with what's happening in the state sector, and they are pulling their kids out and they are educating themselves, and I think that's fantastic.
Fantastic.
And even what you said about you don't have a doctor and you try to avoid having one, I can say the same thing for myself.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. I really wasn't seeing doctors that much even before the pandemic, but now literally I'd be I'd have to be unconscious to see a doctor against my will. Literally.
I take responsibility for my own health.
So. So I think, look, the change in our psyche is starting to happen. Hopefully there's more numbers. We need more numbers of people who are like us, in order for things to actually genuinely start happening. Instead of people thinking that, we're just going to vote for the other guy, or we're going to get this Royal Commission and they're going to fix everything, right? So that's the message that we can leave. Any final thoughts or words from any of you ladies before we wrap this up?
No, thank you.
I think we could probably talk some more about this topic. So if anybody's listening to this and they're interested, do contact Michael and we'll arrange another gathering to talk about, because there's so many different rabbit holes to go down in terms of what happened, and also the COVID inquiry. And obviously, as we said, after the report is published in February, there'll be lots more to report on. So thank you, everybody.
And I think that it's just going to be another more evidence of more and more people not trusting. And that's a good thing, because when people don't trust, that's when they create their own systems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the most important point, I think, Kathryn, right? The point starts, and that's where I guess the growth and the change can actually come, when people, everyone, including most of our camp, who unfortunately are not there yet, right, who still believe that they can vote their way out of that. Yeah. As soon as people understand that this is not going to work, right? Yeah. This is not going to work. As soon as we realize, okay, well, it's up to us and we need to figure this out ourselves, right? Then maybe some things will. So like, you know, you're already there, Kathryn. I mean, all of us here, really, all the four of us are there already, right? But if the majority, even within our sort of group, like, you know, the freedom-minded group, right? If we were there, then I think maybe our predicament would have been better. And you know, I mean, in Australia now, I mean, COVID is like now ancient history. We have a big battle on our hands that is significantly more important, and significantly also more important, like the outcome is significantly more important for the other side, like significantly more important by orders of magnitude. And they're going to deploy everything. Like they're going to throw everything in the book that they have, like, you know, to get that end game, right? That could be obviously a separate episode in itself. So yeah, I think what you, Kathryn, said, like, you know, we need to find solutions outside the current system, right? So let me ask you, I guess, one final question, and we can add on that, right? So if in, like, you know, 2 years, right? Okay, so this was a farce, right? And then in 2 years, there's another government or the same government or whatever. They're going to say, oh, you know what? Yeah, that was a farce. Let's do another royal commission. Right? But we're going to do it right now, right? We're going to do it right. Winston Peters is the prime minister, New Zealand first, Freedom Party. I'm the prime minister. No, now we're going to do it right. We're going to do a royal commission, all the powers, everything. Are you going to bother doing another submission? Honestly, like honest opinion.
I
would say.
Michael, we won't be doing these submissions. We'll be receiving the submissions. We'll be on that. If that was to happen, we would be in there. We won't be taking any more messing.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah,
good point.
We take control. Yeah.
Which is effectively what we did on a small scale anyway.
Yes,
you know, we did our best to do that.
Yeah.
All right, ladies. Yeah, thanks for joining me today. I think that was very, very interesting and productive, and I think very relevant for people also outside New Zealand and Australia, because I think there's an important lesson to be learned from that, right? And I hope that people understood the lesson. I kind of tried to, like, you know, convey it, and I think all of you has done that as well. And hopefully people understand the message, which I'm not going to repeat. But yeah, I just want to say thanks again for joining me. And see you all next time. And best of luck with the effort. Hopefully those FOIs actually work and you get some answers. Thanks for that.